Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. We are reacting to the college football playoff top four, which has been revealed. So the playoffs are now set. It will be TCU taking on Michigan. 4 p.m. Eastern time on New Year's Eve. The lines are out. Michigan already listed as 9.5-point favorites in that game. The total sitting at 59.5. Ohio State and Georgia will then meet in the Peach Bowl at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Georgia, 7-point favorites over the Buckeyes. Now that total sitting at 60.5. Cover 3 podcast host Chip Patterson is here. College football writer Barrett Sallee also alongside. The Wizard of Odds, Kenny White, now joining us. Kenny, I have to come to you first here to react to these lines. What are your thoughts on how Vegas has kind of laid things out initially here?
I think the numbers look really good for two-way betting. Looking at Ohio State or Georgia, a 7-point favorite. I think that's about right. I think it may fluctuate a little bit down to 6. I don't think it'll ever go higher than 7, but I think that number will bounce between 6 and 7. And Michigan, the way they've looked the last couple of weeks, dominating fashion. I thought they would be close to a 10-point favorite in that range, and I could see maybe it going to 10.5, maybe 11 in that range. So I think they've done a good job. The numbers are right where they should be.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, they could move just a little bit. Probably some of those totals might be adjusted. Already seeing a little bit of movement in that on Caesar Sportsbook in terms of the totals. But let's get into these games here. Chip, we'll kind of go around. We'll start with you with the Georgia-Ohio State game. I mean, what's your lean early as you look at that matchup?
I'm going to lay these points with the Bulldogs. When we look at Ohio State, it is a team that when it is gone up against lesser competition, it is simply able to overwhelm. And C.J. Stroud has been elite, and the wide receivers are explosive. But we have seen in the last 2 seasons, C.J. Stroud specifically, and also this offense as a whole, start to, get a little bit bottled up, start to get a little bit uncomfortable. And when I start to imagine the way that the Buckeyes are going to line up against this Georgia defense, I think that we're going to see Jalen Carter and the interior of this Georgia defense really cause problems for this Ohio State passing game. There is a brute physicality that Michigan has brought to Ohio State in each of the last 2 wins in that rivalry. And I have to think that what they are going to see on tape is going to be something that Georgia is going to try to replicate. They're going to try to make the Buckeyes uncomfortable. They're going to try to put them in negative passing situations. And then when we start to look at the other side, this is a Georgia offense that has been lots of different versions of itself. But Ohio State's defense gave up so many explosive plays against Michigan. I think that Georgia is going to be able to try to find some haymakers as well. So my lean here is to go with Georgia and lay the points. Then the operative part of the matchup that I am focusing on right now is the interior of Georgia's defense overwhelming an Ohio State offensive line that on paper looks fantastic, but in actual execution has not been quite as dominant as my expectations were coming into the year.
I'm going to take Ohio State, and I'm going to grab the points. I think this layoff is actually really going to help them. They're going to get healthy at running back. We'll see what happens in their wide receiving core. And if that happens, I think you're looking at a really dynamic, explosive Ohio State offense that can push Georgia into a shootout. And if that's the case, look, Georgia's offense, I think, can get into those kind of games and has been in those kind of games and succeeded. But, this is a different animal. And I think with Ohio State, they're going to get healthy. For Georgia, we saw Ladd McConkey go out with a knee injury. We saw Warren McClendon, starting right tackle, go out with an injury against LSU. I'm really interested to hear their long-term prognosis, because if you lose your starter at tackle, and I think maybe more importantly, your top pure wide receiver, that is a big-time problem, especially for a team in Georgia that just can't seem to get A.D. Mitchell at wide receiver healthy. He played a little bit yesterday. The most important impact he made was a pass on that 2-point conversion play to hang a 50-burger on LSU. So to me, I think this gives a chance for Ohio State to get healthy. And it gives and the concerns for Georgia from an injury perspective are there. And then on top of that, I think from a matchup perspective, this is just a bad matchup for Georgia. They might win, but they're going to have to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. And Ohio State, I think the fact that they're going to get healthier at running back, that gives C.J. Stroud a bunch of options. So I like Ohio State. I'll grab the points. Not sure if I'm going to pick Georgia to win straight up, but I think this will be a really, really close game, definitely within a touchdown.
Yeah, I agree, Barrett. I like Ohio State here. I like teams that are off a loss because you learn so much more about yourself on off a loss than you do when you're winning. And Georgia, they lost the SEC championship game last year, highly motivated in the college football playoff games. This year they wanted to win that SEC title game yesterday. That was their on their calendar. They had that circled, not to have a letdown on that day. But this is a game that, I don't think they thought they were going to get Ohio State. I think they thought they might get TCU, and that might be a lot easier game. This Ohio State team will be ready. Throw the Michigan game out. The score was so misleading with the 2 late touchdown runs by Donovan, the long touchdown passes, 2 turnovers by Ohio State, the injuries they had. Barrett's right. They're going to get healthier. They're going to learn from what happened. They're going to compete, and they have the athletes to compete. Their roster can match up against Georgia's roster man for man. There's no doubt about it. There's as many NFL guys on Ohio State's roster as there is Georgia's roster. So I'm taking Ohio State here.
Certainly a team that's going to be thankful for a month off is TCU. I mean, they haven't had a bye since week 3, so they've played a lot of games over the span. They'll be looking to get some rest as they look to get a little bit healthier as well. But here they come up against Michigan as 9.5-point underdogs. Kenny, when you look at this matchup and the layoff, what are you thinking in terms of how these two teams might set out, and who would you take?
Yeah, I'm leaning to TCU here. I've loved what I've seen all year from this team, and I have a feeling that they knew they were in the college football playoff going into yesterday against Kansas State. They ran into a good team, and it's funny that, I wanted expansion in college football playoffs for teams like TCU and Kansas State to get in, and now we're talking about expansion would have helped Alabama. That's not what expansion was for, to get an Alabama into the playoffs, but it was for more a TCU and a Kansas State, because Kansas State could be playing as well as anybody in the country right now. And they got one of the best coaches. This game right here, though, I'm going to lean at TCU again. I'm not going to bet it early. I'm going to wait. I think there's going to be a lot of love for Michigan. I think this number will go up. I think it'll go up over 10, maybe 10.5, maybe even 11 in that range. But if I can get 10.5, I'll take 10.5 with TCU. And I think this has got a chance to be a very high-scoring football game because TCU's good. Max Duggan can put points on the board against Michigan's defense. There's no doubt about it. So give me the points with TCU and the over.
I'm leaning TCU, and Kenny, you mentioned the expanded playoff. I'm just saying the BCS would have been pretty solid right now, too. But that's neither here nor there. I'm going to take TCU. I'm going to grab the points as well. I think Max Duggan, that poor dude was about to pass out on the field yesterday. It's going to give him a chance to get right and get healthy. And you're right. TCU's been playing week in, week out, and now you have a chance to sort of recalibrate. I think for TCU, the fact that they can do it in a variety of different ways, running the ball, passing the ball, we've seen them win with defense this year. I think it gives them a pretty good chance to go up against a Michigan team that, J.J. McCarthy's been solid. Donovan Edwards has been phenomenal in Blake Corum's absence. But I think against this TCU team, they're going to have a hard time. I think it's going to be a close game. I think you're talking about 2 semifinals that actually might be really competitive, which is something we don't see very often. I love Max Duggan in this spot. I think he can go throw for throw with J.J. McCarthy. But I think more importantly, you have 2 really good running backs in Miller and Edwards that are going to go up against each other. Very similar teams. I think we sort of get in this mindset that the Big 12 is this finesse league. No, TCU can absolutely pound you, especially at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I think because of that, you're going to see a low-scoring game, and that leads me to go with the Horned Frogs to at least cover.
Kansas State had TCU in a bad place yesterday. That TCU offense, which has been among the most explosive in the entire country, couldn't get anything. It was just YOLO balls. It was just doing whatever we could because Max Duggan had no time. Kansas State heated Duggan up, and those long, deep developing passing plays, well, if there's no time to be able to get them going, then you're not going to be able to hit on those. I think that Kansas State put together a blueprint for Michigan to come in and say, we think that we can take this TCU offense, which, by the way, as it has come down the stretch, has not been quite as explosive. Now, Quentin Johnston is a future pro, and Max Duggan has been playing hero ball that is worthy of the kind of Heisman Trophy consideration that he has gotten over the weekend and may potentially get going into next week. But I do think that on a down-to-down basis, TCU has really had to live on these hero plays because it has not been as effective We saw that it wasn't really that effective against Texas earlier this season. It was not very effective against Baylor earlier this season. These late in the season performances where TCU's offense is just not quite clicking, and they need Max Duggan hero ball. They need Quentin Johnston, Savion Williams, these amazing wide receivers to make incredible catches. Nothing looks easy for TCU's offense right now, and that concerns me. And I think Michigan can do to TCU a lot of what Kansas State did. Look, when Barrett mentioned, when we've gone into these college football playoff semifinals, do you know what the long layoff has done? It's created just some daggum blowouts. 23 points, 21 points, 21 points, 17 points, 6 points, Ohio State Clemson, 35 points, 27 points, 11 points. All but one of the college football playoff semifinals since the start of 2018 have been decided by double digits, several of them over 20 points. When I'm looking at all these lines, I almost think I'm going to entertain the alt lines. I might start to look at, what about the blowout scenario? Or even like the Ohio State. What about an Ohio State to win this thing by 14 points? Because history suggests the semifinals just aren't close.
Well, and now that we've got the top four set, now that we've got the matchup set, there has been an adjustment in terms of the odds for one of these teams to win the college football playoff. Earlier in the day, obviously those lines were different, adjusted now. The only thing that stayed the same is Georgia at minus 135. But Michigan have gone from plus 325 to plus 290. Ohio State went from plus 325 to plus 350. And TCU's odds have lengthened a bit as well. They were plus 1,400 coming into the day. Now they are at 16 to 1. So Barrett, when you look at those odds, who are you picking to win the national championship?
Picked Ohio State before the season, picked Ohio State before championship Saturday, picked Ohio State right now. I think Ohio State has more upside than anybody else. I think they beat Georgia outright, and then I think they'll get revenge on Michigan in the national championship game. If they're healthy, they have a better roster than Georgia. You look at the 24/7 team talent rankings. That team is loaded with studs. The fact that they're going to get really healthy at running back, I think, will help because they're so diverse in terms of how they can operate in the running game. And, man, those wide receivers, I think against Georgia, look, I'm not necessarily worried about the passing yards LSU had because that game was essentially over in the first quarter. But Georgia's defense, Keely Ringo, some of those guys have not been playing that well. And I do think Ohio State can take advantage of that. And then against Michigan, the revenge factor is there. I think offensively, they're going to be able to do things that makes J.J. McCarthy uncomfortable and get into a shootout. So I'll take Ohio State, and I love that number. That's big. That's big-time value right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at those numbers, the only bet I could make would be Ohio State. I took plus $4. Guys were talking about it was plus $10 or $11 early in the week before USC lost to Utah. I wish I would have jumped on it at that point. C.J. Stroud will be the best quarterback on the field against Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett's been a great story. C.J. Stroud's the better quarterback. He's going to play in the NFL, and he's going to have a great NFL career. And the weapons he has at Ohio State are tremendous. It's going to be a tough game because Georgia is good. They're so well coached. It will be a battle. It's going to be one of the best semifinal games we've seen in a long, long time. But I'll take Ohio State plus the money.
Give me Georgia. And to me, all Georgia really needs to do is get past Ohio State, and then it will be able to win either in against Michigan or against TCU. The Buckeyes are the biggest hurdle here. Laying $1.35, it might not be the best bet, but I got to give you my pick to win with a little bit of integrity, because here's why. What I saw this Georgia coaching staff and this Georgia team do to Michigan last year with all that time off to prepare was absolutely clinical. And this is where we start to go back to Kirby Smart and him building another version of the Alabama dynasty right there in Athens, where you've got the kind of staff, where you've got the kind of expertise, and you have a group that receives coaching. You have a group that's going to be able to take what you're giving them with all of these resources and put it into practice and be able to put it into the game plan. I mean, we all remember Nakobe Dean calling out Michigan's plays before they ran them. I think that the preparation process is going to give Georgia a leg up on the competition, and we are going to see the Bulldogs become the first college football team since Alabama in 2011 and 2012 to go back-to-back. So not the most favorable price. Maybe you want to just sort of build this into your wagering for the semifinals and then make a play on the title game. But my pick to win, the Georgia Bulldogs.
Chip not liking any chaos when it comes to the semifinals or a pick to win, going with the favorites the whole way. He is the host of the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson, college football writer Barrett Sallee, and the Wizard of Odds, Kenny White, joining us to give us an early look at those college football playoff lines as we head towards the end of December. And Sportsline has a live betting show for your enjoyment Monday to Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, as of course we have the NFL slate, which is currently going on. Tune in at 2 Eastern today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.